My husband is an elite department head. You're nothing like him, with only a middle school diploma. With a sneer on her face, Emily, my former childhood friend and classmate, taunted me. Then I guess he's fired. What? Even my former classmates were stunned by the words I had just spoken. My name is Kevin. I turned 30 this year. I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 3 years now. Sarah is kind and gentle, and we have a wonderful marriage, living peacefully together. One day, as I was checking the mail at home, I found a fancy envelope. When I looked at the sender, it was from Emily, a middle school classmate I hadn't heard from in over 10 years. Inside the envelope was an invitation to our middle school reunion. Why now, after all this time? I was puzzled, but at the same time, the thought of seeing everyone again made me decide to attend. The day of the reunion arrived. Sarah helped me pick out a suit, and I headed to the venue. When I arrived, it was a standing buffet-style party, and everyone was already mingling freely. I exchanged greetings with a few people and was enjoying the food when Emily, who was organizing the reunion, approached me. "Oh, look at this dull group. Just a bunch of poor people." Emily sneered down at us, clearly mocking. I was never the type to stand out in class. "Kevin, it's been a while." I was worried, wondering what you were doing and where you were. Emily spoke to me with a mix of sarcasm and disdain. We had once been childhood friends, living close by. "I'm getting married soon, so I gathered everyone here today to share the news." "Oh, congratulations. My husband is an elite department head." "You're nothing like him, with only a middle school diploma." Emily sneered again. Her words stung, but not wanting to cause a scene, I sincerely congratulated her. Others around us also offered their congratulations. Emily, satisfied, continued talking. "I absolutely expect you all to attend my wedding. My husband is set to take over his family's company after the wedding, so there will be a lot of guests on his side. That's why I'd like you all, my middle school classmates, to attend as guests on my side." She handed out wedding invitations as she spoke. It was obvious she just wanted to show off, but no one dared to say anything and took the invitations. "You're coming, of course?" After all, we were childhood friends. Emily emphasized childhood friends in a deliberate way. Emily's mother and my mom were apparently good friends back in school. However, I lost my mother when I was in 3rd grade, and after that, I was raised by my father, who worked in a factory making machine parts. That's when everything changed. My father tried to drown his loneliness in alcohol and gambling after my mother passed away, and my life changed completely. We had to sell our house and move to a rundown apartment. Even when I started middle school, I couldn't afford a new uniform and had to make do with hand-me-downs from relatives. My father never attended a single school event, like open houses or graduation ceremonies. Because of that, my classmates started calling me poor and filthy, hurling cruel insults at me. Seeing this, Emily began to distance herself from me, and by middle school, she was leading the charge in bullying me. In the 3rd year of middle school. "Dad, about high school." I cautiously brought up the topic, only to be met with a furious outburst. "What are you talking about? There's no way I'm sending you to high school." "What?" I was taken aback and found myself at a loss for words. Even though I desperately tried to convince my father of my desire to continue my education, he stubbornly refused to change his mind. Soon, the news that I would be working right after middle school became a topic of discussion in class. Among those who mocked me was Emily, who was at the center of our class. "What? You're going to work after middle school?" Well, with only one parent, I guess you can't afford high school. How pitiful for someone as poor as you. When Emily said this, the other classmates snickered. I desperately wanted to change my situation. On the day I graduated from middle school, I quietly left home and took a train to the city by myself. I had no one to rely on, and I was filled with fear and anxiety. Since that day, I've rarely returned home or even to my hometown. I kept in touch with a few close friends from time to time, but that was it. Later, I searched for work in the city, but with only a middle school diploma, very few places were willing to hire me. The only job I could find was at the cleaning company where I currently work. Given that I've always been a bit of a neat freak, this job seemed to suit me. I worked diligently, and a few years later, when I was 22, I met Sarah at my workplace. I was drawn to her beautiful smile and the respectful way she treated everyone, and then she surprised me by asking me out to dinner. We continued dating and eventually got married. When I decided to marry Sarah, I figured I should at least inform my father, so I gave him a call. But he sounded utterly uninterested. "Oh, someone actually wants to marry you? She must be pretty quirky." "Dad, that's not a very nice thing to say." "Well, as long as you don't involve me, do whatever you want." I had secretly hoped he might be a little happy that his only son was getting married, so I was pretty disheartened. But Sarah gently comforted me. "Kevin, I'm your family now, right? From now on, let's focus on building our happiness together." Her words touched me deeply, and I remember hugging her and shedding a few tears. Since then, I've tried to forget about my family and classmates, focusing instead on the life I've built. But suddenly, receiving an invitation to Emily's wedding, I decided to talk it over with Sarah when I got home. Maybe this is their way of trying to reconcile with you, Kevin. Maybe they've grown up and are rethinking things. You think so? I think you should go. Of course, I'll be there with you. All right. I'll attend, then. Thanks, Sarah. The next day, I marked attending on the invitation and sent it back. 3 months later, on the day of Emily's wedding, I put on my suit. Sarah had been wearing a dress since the morning, and her hair was beautifully styled. I couldn't help but be captivated by her. Together, we headed to the venue. The wedding was held at one of the largest and most well-known venues in the area. Well, considering she's marrying the president of Harrison Industries, it's no surprise the wedding is this grand. Yeah, I bet there are over 300 guests here. We chatted as we entered the chapel, waiting for the bride and groom to arrive. Emily walked down the aisle with her father, looking genuinely happy. Her father, too, had a proud look on his face. I clapped along with everyone else, but watching this scene made me feel a little envious and uneasy. My father hadn't attended my wedding, and sensing how I felt about it, Sarah had kindly suggested we have a small ceremony, just the two of us. After moving to the reception hall, we headed to the friends' table, where my old classmates were seated. Everyone seemed curious about Sarah, with some even asking about her educational background, amused by the situation. Sarah just laughed it off gracefully. I exchanged a glance with her and took my seat. Then, the reception began. Emily, now dressed in a traditional outfit, beamed with a radiant smile. Next to her, the groom, Eric, had the appearance of a sharp and modern CEO. Everyone applauded the couple, celebrating their union. It seemed that many of the guests were executives and employees from Harrison Industries, all gathered to celebrate the couple's new beginning. Harrison Industries is a mid-sized machine design company, and it was no surprise that the wedding of its president was such a grand affair. As the reception reached its midpoint, The bride and groom exited for a quick wardrobe change. Taking this opportunity, I stood up and told Sarah I was heading to the restroom before making my way outside the venue. To my surprise, I ran into Emily and Eric, who had just exited earlier. They were taking commemorative photos after their exit. I hadn't anticipated bumping into them, and feeling slightly flustered, I quickly offered my heartfelt congratulations. "Emily, thank you for inviting me today. Congratulations on your marriage." Emily's expression turned sour as she responded with a dismissive tone. "Oh, you actually came. Did you manage to put together a proper gift? You seem to be wearing a decent suit, at least. Is this guy one of your classmates?" Eric, standing beside Emily, looked me up and down with a scrutinizing gaze. "Yes, he is. I didn't really want to invite him because I was embarrassed, but he insisted on coming." "Embarrassed? Why?" Eric asked, glancing at Emily. "I never insisted on coming. In fact, I'm sure all the classmates here today felt the same way. We only came because Emily urged us to." The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I held them back, not wanting to spoil their big day. However, Emily and Eric continued to mock me without any regard for my feelings. "Because he's only got a middle school education." Emily pointed at me as she spoke. "Whoa! Seriously?" Eric said in an amused tone. The look in his eyes as he glanced at me was filled with blatant contempt. "And yet he's married." "What does your wife do, anyway?" Emily asked, so I answered honestly. "She works in cleaning, we both do, at the same company." Hearing this, Emily and Eric exchanged glances before sneering with twisted expressions. "Ah, that's a dirty and smelly job. It's perfect for someone like you with only a middle school diploma. But if I were working for a cleaning company, I'd be too embarrassed to admit it. Yeah, as a CEO, I can't even imagine it. That's as low as it gets." "Hey, don't talk like that." I was angry, but Emily waved her hand dismissively as if shooing away an annoyance. "Just go home already. It's embarrassing to have you here. Poverty might be contagious. Yeah, why did you two even bother coming? Your wife should be ashamed, too. How can she not be embarrassed to walk beside someone like you?" With that, Emily and Eric turned their backs on me and quickly walked away. I clenched my fists, trembling with anger. After everything I went through in middle school, I still came here wanting to genuinely congratulate them, and this is how I'm treated. To not only insult me but also mock Sarah and our work. This is unforgivable. As I stood frozen in the hallway of the wedding venue, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, I heard everything, Kevin. I have an idea." Though Sarah wore a calm smile, her voice carried a clear edge of anger. Afterward, I returned to the reception hall with Sarah. A while later, Emily and Eric re-entered the room after their outfit change, but when they noticed I was still there, their faces twisted with displeasure. I did my best to avoid looking at Emily and tried not to let it bother me. As the reception approached its final moments, the host picked up the microphone and began moving around the room. Apparently, the host was going around the room, asking guests to share their congratulations for the couple. Employees from Harrison Industries praised Eric, while a woman who seemed to be one of Emily's friends teared up and said, "I wish you all the happiness." This created a warm and emotional atmosphere. The host eventually made their way over to our table, where Emily's middle school classmates were seated. Here we have the middle school classmates of the bride, Emily. We'd love to hear your words of congratulations. With those words, the microphone was handed to me. I glanced at Emily, who was glaring at me with a look that clearly said, "Don't you dare say anything unnecessary." I instinctively looked over at Sarah, who gave me a silent nod. I nodded back and began to speak. "I'm one of the bride's classmates. I have just one thing to say. From this point forward, my company, Anderson Cleaning Services, will be terminating all contracts with Eric's company, Harrison Industries." A sudden silence fell over the room. I smiled and handed the microphone back to the host. What exactly does that mean?" The host stammered, visibly sweating, as Emily suddenly spoke up from the head table. "I'm sorry, everyone. This man is emotionally unstable and prone to lying. It's so embarrassing. Here he is, just a lowly janitor, spouting nonsense." Eric quickly jumped in. "That's right. People like them don't belong here. Get them out of here." The atmosphere in the room grew tense as the staff began approaching Sarah and me, who remained seated with calm expressions. But just then, a voice rang out. "Wait. Are you the president of Anderson Cleaning Services and the executive officer, Sarah?" The voice, filled with shock, belonged to Eric's father, who was dressed in a formal tailcoat. Eric had recently taken over Harrison Industries from this man as part of his marriage arrangement. "Indeed, I am the president of Anderson Cleaning Services, and this is my wife, Sarah, the executive officer. We were invited today as the bride's middle school classmates." As I spoke, the guests on Eric's side of the room began murmuring among themselves. Earlier, the bride and groom told us to leave, saying poverty is contagious and that our work is dirty and shameful. Please forgive us for staying despite their request. Sarah said this calmly, and Eric's father, his face turning pale, began shouting at the head table. Eric apologized to these people immediately. But Eric and Emily, half smirking, replied, "Ha! Dad, what are you talking about? Why should we apologize to people like them?" "Exactly. Who even are these people?" Eric's father, his voice trembling, yelled again. "Eric, don't you recognize the name Anderson Cleaning Services?" "Ha! Anderson Cleaning Services." Eric muttered, and as the realization dawned on him, his face grew increasingly pale. "Wait, you mean our major client?" "What?" Emily gasped in shock at Eric's words. "That's right. Recently, we commissioned your company to design and develop cleaning equipment for our business," Sarah said quietly, and I continued. "We also recently placed an additional order for the development of a new vacuum model." In reality, Sarah is the daughter of the owners of Anderson Cleaning Services, a company that I joined after moving to the city. The company I joined after moving to the city was actually run by Sarah's parents. Today, in addition to providing cleaning services, the company develops its own line of cleaning products and has recently entered the e-commerce business. As a result, it's one of the rare cleaning companies that has grown into a $100 million business, with over 6,500 employees at its headquarters alone. I worked my way up from the ground level, contributing to the development of cleaning products that became hits, eventually earning the position of head of product planning at the headquarters. It was there that I met Sarah, and we eventually got married. Despite knowing that I only had a middle school education, Sarah and her family welcomed me warmly. Wanting to repay them for their kindness, I threw myself into my work. Last year, when Sarah's father retired, I was set to take over as president of the company. If we lose the contract with Anderson Cleaning Services, do you have any idea how much financial damage that would cause us? Eric's father, his face now beet red, yelled at his son, who was trembling uncontrollably. Something like this: "I had no idea. That's because you didn't take your responsibilities seriously after inheriting the business. You've even forgotten the face of a major client. I, I, I never should have handed over the company to you. Come with me, now." Eric's father stormed over to the head table, grabbed Eric by the collar, and dragged him over to where we were. He then forcefully pushed Eric down, making him bow an apology. "Please, I beg you for forgiveness. We cannot afford to lose such a critical project that our company's future depends on," Eric's father pleaded, bowing low beside his son. "I'm deeply sorry. Please forgive me." Eric, also bowing, began sweating profusely as drops of sweat fell to the floor. As I watched this scene, Sarah turned to me. "Kevin, what do you want to do? Then he's fired. He's clearly not fit to be a president." "What?" When I said this, my former classmates gasped, shocked to realize the level of authority I wielded. Eric's father quickly spoke up in a panic. "Of course. It was a mistake on my part to trust him with the company. Well, I have no intention of forgiving him. I was foolish to place an order for new products as a wedding gift." Cries of dismay erupted from the Harrison Industries guests. I even noticed Ryan, the head of sales, collapse in a fit of panic. When I heard at the reunion that Emily was marrying the president of Harrison Industries, I decided to place a large order for new products with their company. I genuinely believed that by inviting me to the wedding, Emily wanted to reconcile. But that expectation was thoroughly betrayed. Emily, who had been watching the situation with a bewildered expression, suddenly turned red and lashed out at me. "Who do you think you are, talking like that, whether you're a president or a vice president?" I glared at Emily and shot back. "Emily, you should be more worried about yourself. If we pull our business, Harrison Industries will suffer significant losses. You might not get to enjoy that luxurious life as a stay-at-home life you were bragging about." Emily's face turned pale as she finally realized the gravity of her situation. "Kevin, let's go." "Yeah, Sarah." With Eric and his father still groveling on the floor, and Emily standing frozen with a pale face, I put my arm around Sarah's shoulder and walked out of the room. Afterward, we did indeed terminate our contracts with Harrison Industries. The company suffered severe financial damage as a result, and Eric was stripped of his position as president to take responsibility. Disowned by his father, Eric lost everything: his status, his money, all of it. It seems that with nothing left to hold on to, Eric and Emily eventually chose to divorce as their arguments became constant. Abandoned by her family and with no one left to turn to, Emily now reportedly works in the nightlife industry, living on her own. As for us, we've continued to live peacefully. Recently, we welcomed a beautiful baby boy into our family. Sarah and her family are overjoyed and have been doting on him ever since. I'm so happy that I met you, Sarah. There was a time when I had given up on life. That day, when I boarded the train, desperately seeking somewhere to belong. Even though I was terrified, I'm now truly grateful to my younger self for taking action that day. I'd like you to come with me to visit my mother's grave soon, and, if you're okay with it, I'd also like us to visit my father together." When I said this quietly, Sarah smiled warmly and nodded. "Of course. From now on, I plan to cherish each day as I protect my family and the company that we've built together."